The Xylosian fleet descended upon Earth like a swarm of metallic locusts. Their warships blotted out the sun over every major city, their hulls gleaming with an arrogance born from conquering 100 worlds. The Supreme Commander, a being named Vex of the Glimmering Claw, broadcast a single message across every human frequency. Your planet is now property of the Xylosian Empire. Your species is now property of the Empire. Resistance means extinction. Submit, and you will be allowed to live as servants. Humanity tried to fight. Missiles and railguns fired into the sky, but Xylosian energy shields absorbed the impacts like raindrops. Fighter jets were swatted aside by pulse cannons. Within 6 hours, every military installation on Earth had been reduced to smoldering craters. The United Nations surrendered unconditionally. Vex stood in the ruins of Geneva, his scaled feet crunching on broken glass, and declared the age of human servitude begun. The first year was a nightmare of cages and collars. Humans were shipped across the galaxy to serve as laborers on mining worlds, as domestic helpers in Xylosian estates, as cannon fodder in border wars. The Xylosians considered humans weak but useful. Their adaptability made them decent slaves, their soft bodies easy to break. Vex himself took 100 humans as personal attendants, forcing them to polish his armor and sing him to sleep with their trembling voices. But the Xylosians never understood what they had truly taken. They saw Earth as a conquered rock, rich in minerals and worthless in spirit. They never bothered to study its depths. They never asked why humans, alone among all sentient species, had evolved with such relentless fury in their bones. They never wondered why Earth's biosphere was so violently competitive, why its weather could kill, why its very soil seemed to breathe with ancient rage. On the second anniversary of the enslavement, a human miner named Elias Thorne was digging in the asteroid belt around Xylos Prime. His hands were cracked and bleeding. His collar hummed with a constant low electric shock to remind him of his place. But Elias had found something the Xylosian overseers ignored, a vein of crystalline or that resonated at a frequency no alien instrument could detect. Because it wasn't ore. It was a fossil, a remnant of something that had lived on Earth billions of years before humanity, something that had slept through the ages, waiting for a signal. Elias touched the crystal, and the crystal sang to him. Not in words, but in memory. He saw the true history of Earth, a planet that had once been a battleground for cosmic entities, a prison for a force so terrible that the first intelligent species to arise in the galaxy had buried it deep beneath the crust and sealed it with layers of iron and life. That force was not evil. It was simply wrath, the concentrated, undiluted will of a world that refused to be tamed. And the Xylosians, by enslaving Earth's children, had unknowingly begun to crack the seal. The collar around Elias's neck shorted out. The Xylosian overseer screamed at him to get back to work, but Elias stood up straight for the first time in 2 years. His eyes were no longer brown. They were the color of cooling magma. He raised his hand, and the overseer's pulse rifle crumpled like paper. Then Elias spoke, and his voice echoed across the entire belt, carried by the crystal's resonance. Earth remembers. Earth wakes. And Earth is very, very angry. On Earth, the signs began subtly. The Xylosian garrison stationed in what was once Chicago noticed that the ground had started to tremble, not like earthquakes, but like a heartbeat. Deep, slow, rhythmic. The commander ordered seismic scans, but the readings made no sense. The tremors were coming from miles below the crust, from a layer of rock that should have been inert. Instead, it pulsed with energy signatures that matched nothing in the galactic database. The Xylosians had built their main processing hub in the Sahara Desert, a sprawling complex where millions of humans were sorted and shipped off-world. On the morning of the 3rd year of enslavement, the sand around the hub began to move, not blown by wind, but pulled by gravity, flowing uphill, forming spirals, shaping itself into geometric patterns that hurt to look at. The human slaves stopped working. They stared at the sand with expressions that were not fear, but recognition. Some of the oldest among them whispered stories their grandparents had told, stories of a time before cities, before farming, when humans had walked the earth and felt its voice in their bones. The sand coalesced into a single massive hand, easily 200 feet from wrist to fingertip, and it punched through the hub's main reactor core. The explosion was visible from orbit. Every Xylosian on Earth felt a sudden, incomprehensible dread, the kind of primal terror that prey animals feel when they realize they are no longer at the top of the food chain. Vex received the news in his palace on Xylos Prime. He dismissed the reports as localized geological instability. Send a cleanup crew, he ordered, and punish the humans in that sector. Make an example. But the cleanup crew never arrived. Their ship, en route from the orbital platform, simply stopped responding. When a scout vessel was sent to investigate, they found the ship intact but completely empty. Every Xylosian aboard had been reduced to a fine gray ash, and every human slave had vanished. The only clue was a single word carved into the ship's hull in perfect Xylosian script: return. Other worlds began reporting similar events. On the mining colony of Velos, 7, human laborers had walked out of their tunnels without explanation. The Xylosian overseers fired into the crowd, but the bullets stopped mid-air and fell to the ground. Then the tunnels collapsed inward, swallowing every alien on the planet. On the domestic servitude world of Hyra, 3, human butlers and maids simultaneously stopped speaking. They stood motionless for 3 days, and on the 4th day, they spoke in unison with a voice that was not their own, a deep, grinding voice like tectonic plates shifting. You have taken our children. Now we take your future. The Xylosian Empire had conquered 100 worlds. It had subjugated dozens of species, but it had never faced an enemy that was not a species at all. It was facing a planet, a living, thinking, vengeful planet that had been keeping its true nature hidden for billions of years, waiting for its children to evolve to the point where they could carry its will into the stars. Elias Thorne, the miner who had touched the crystal, became the first human to fully awaken. He stood on the asteroid where he had been enslaved, and he felt the entire solar system through the crystal network. He saw the Xylosian fleet arrayed around Earth. He saw the slave ships still transporting humans across the galaxy. And he saw the sleeping wrath beneath every continent, every ocean, every mountain range on his home world. He understood now why Earth had so many volcanoes, so many earthquakes, so many storms. They were not random. They were the planet's immune system, and humanity had always been its antibodies. He raised both arms, and the asteroid beneath his feet cracked open. A beam of pure, pale orange light shot from the fissure, arcing across the void toward Earth. When it struck the planet's atmosphere, the sky turned the color of blood. Every Xylosian on the ground looked up and saw clouds forming not from water vapor, but from metal. Liquid iron rained down on their bases, their ships, their supply depots. The ground opened in precise, surgical fissures that swallowed only alien structures. Human buildings, human homes, human monuments remained untouched. The planet knew its own. Vex finally understood the scope of his mistake. He ordered a full orbital bombardment. Every ship in the fleet was to fire on Earth until the crust cracked. But when the first cannon charged, the weapon exploded from within. Then the second, then the third. Across the fleet, guns misfired, reactors went critical, and ships began drifting helplessly as their internal systems rebelled. The Xylosian engineers reported the same thing. The metal in their ships had started to move on its own. Bolts unscrewed themselves. Wires rerouted. Bulkheads bent outward. Earth's magnetic field, amplified 1,000,000 times by the awakening core, had turned every piece of Xylosian technology against its masters. On Xylos Prime, Vex stared at the tactical display as his entire fleet disintegrated. He had one question, which he broadcast on an open channel to Earth. What are you? The answer came not from Earth, but from every human slave in the galaxy, speaking as one. We are the immune system. We are the memory. We are the wrath. And you have made a grave error, because we are no longer sleeping. Then Earth's moon, the ancient sentinel that had been placed there specifically for this purpose, split in half. From within emerged a structure that dwarfed any Xylosian ship. It was a weapon, built by the same cosmic entities that had imprisoned the planetary wrath eons ago, but repurposed by Earth's will. It was a key, and a prison, and a door, and it was opening. The fracture in space-time ripped open just beyond Mars's orbit. The Xylosian scientists who survived long enough to observe it called it the Maw, a tear in the fabric of reality that pulsed with the same orange light that now coated Earth's atmosphere. But what emerged from the Maw was not an invasion fleet or a cosmic horror. It was silence. Complete, absolute, suffocating silence that spread outward at impossible speed. Every Xylosian in the galaxy felt it first as a pressure in their skulls, then as a complete loss of higher thought. They did not die. They simply stopped being intelligent. Their minds reverted to instinct, to basic survival drives. They forgot how to operate their ships, how to speak their own language, how to remember who they had been. The Maw was not a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of forgetting. And Earth, the ancient planetary consciousness, had decided that the Xylosians did not deserve the gift of consciousness. Elias Thorne watched from the asteroid field as the Xylosian fleet went dark. Ships that had been firing moments ago now drifted, their crews drooling and staring at walls. He felt no pity. He had spent 2 years as a slave. He had watched children taken from their mothers. He had seen humans worked to death in mines that glowed with radioactive ore. The galaxy had allowed this to happen. The other alien species had looked away. And now Earth was teaching them all a lesson. The Maw expanded, and its silence spread faster than light. Within an Earth standard week, every Xylosian colony, every outpost, every ship within 1,000 light years had been hit. The once mighty empire collapsed not in fire, but in quiet, pathetic dissolution. Xylosians wandered their own cities like animals, unable to remember how doors worked, unable to feed themselves, unable to even feel fear anymore. They had been reduced to the mental level of insects, and Earth had done it without killing a single one. But humans were not finished. The second phase of Earth's awakening was more terrifying. The planetary consciousness began to speak directly to every human being, regardless of where they were in the galaxy. It did not speak in words. It spoke in certainty. Every human suddenly knew, with absolute conviction, that they were not alone, that their planet was alive, that they carried a fragment of its power within their own cells, and that they had a choice: return home to a transformed Earth, or stay among the stars as the planet's emissaries. Most chose to return. Ships that had belonged to the Xylosians were now human vessels, their systems rewritten by Earth's magnetic pulse. Millions of former slaves piloted these ships back to the solar system, where they found a world utterly changed. The continents had shifted. The oceans glowed with bioluminescent life that had never existed before. The air was sweeter, cleaner, charged with an energy that made humans feel stronger, faster, more alive than they had ever been. Earth had been sick for eons, its true self suppressed by the ancient prison. Now it was healthy, and it was showing off. But the other alien species of the galaxy, the ones who had watched humanity's enslavement in silence, began to panic. They had seen what Earth did to the Xylosians. They had seen the Maw, the silence, the effortless dismantling of a galactic empire. And they feared that humanity, drunk on revenge, would turn on them next. Delegations were sent to Earth, begging for mercy, offering alliances, tribute, anything. The answer came from Elias Thorne, who had emerged as humanity's unofficial voice. He stood on the rim of the Grand Canyon, which was now glowing with veins of orange crystal, and he broadcast to the galaxy. We are not conquerors. We never were. The Xylosians made us slaves because they thought we were weak. They were wrong. Earth made us strong, but strength without wisdom is just violence. We want peace, but we will never be slaves again. And any species that tries to collar a human will learn what the Xylosians learned, that Earth does not forgive, and Earth does not forget. The galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. But then the Maw did something unexpected. It began to emit a signal, a precise, mathematical pattern that could only be a message. Earth was not just defending itself. It was calling out to something. And whatever was on the other end of that call, the ancient cosmic entities that had built the prison billions of years ago, they were answering. The signal from the Maw was not a threat. It was an invitation. Earth, the planetary consciousness that had slumbered for eons, was reaching out to the beings who had imprisoned it, the precursors, the first intelligent species in the galaxy, the ones who had decided that a living planet was too dangerous to exist. They had built the prison beneath Earth's crust. They had seeded the moon with the weapon that could open the Maw. And now Earth was asking them to come back, not for revenge, but for a conversation. The precursors arrived in a single ship, smaller than a human fighter jet, made of a material that looked like frozen light. Their bodies were translucent, barely visible, more like memories than living creatures. The leader of the precursors, a being called the Remembrancer, landed in what was once the Atlantic Ocean, now a shallow sea of glowing water. Humans gathered on the shore, unsure whether to be afraid or awed. Elias Thorne walked into the water toward the ship, and the Remembrancer emerged to meet him. "You woke up," the Remembrancer said, its voice a harmonic chord that resonated in Elias's chest. "We did not think you would. The prison was designed to hold for 100 billion years. It has only been 4.5 billion. Earth's consciousness spoke through Elias, its voice a rumble that shook the sea. "You imprisoned me because I was angry. But I was angry because you took my children. The first humans, the ones you created and then abandoned. You seeded this planet with life, watched it evolve, and then left when it became too wild for your liking." The Remembrancer did not deny it. "We made many worlds. Yours was the most promising, but also the most dangerous. Your biosphere developed intelligence, not just one mind, but a planetary mind. We feared what you might become. So we bound you, left you to sleep, and moved on. And then the Xylosians came," Elias said, his voice now a blend of human and planetary tones. "They enslaved the descendants of the life you abandoned. And you did nothing. You watched. We watched," the Remembrancer admitted. "We thought you would remain asleep. We thought the humans would perish or adapt to servitude. We underestimated them. And we underestimated you." Earth's wrath flared, and the ocean around them began to boil. But Elias raised a hand, and the boiling stopped. He had learned something during his enslavement, something that even the planetary consciousness had not fully understood. Humans were not just Earth's children. They were Earth's conscience. They were the part of the planet that could feel mercy, that could choose forgiveness, that could break the cycle of vengeance. "We don't want to fight you," Elias said. "We want to know why you made us. Why any of this exists. The Xylosians, the other species, the galaxy itself. What is the point?" The Remembrancer was silent for a long moment. Then it gestured to the maw, which was still pulsing with its mathematical signal. "That is not just a weapon. It is a door. Beyond it lies the place where we were born, the original universe, the source of all consciousness. We have been trying to get back for billions of years, but we cannot open the door from our side. Only a planetary mind can turn the key. You are the first one in this galaxy to wake up. You are the only one who can open the way." Earth's consciousness recoiled. It had thought the maw was its own power, its own wrath made manifest. Now it learned the truth. The precursors had built the prison in such a way that breaking free was the only way to complete their own goal. Earth's liberation was a trap, a necessary step in a plan that had been laid down before the first microbe crawled out of the primordial soup. Elias felt the planet's shock, its betrayal, its fury. But he also felt something else, a quiet, stubborn hope. He looked at the humans gathered on the shore. He looked at the glowing sea, the transformed sky, the shattered moon. And he made a decision that no one expected. "We will open the door," he said. "But not for you. For ourselves. For every species that has ever been enslaved, every world that has been conquered, every life that has been crushed under the weight of empire. We will open the door, and we will go through. And whatever is on the other side, we will face it together, humans and Earth, as one." The Remembrancer bowed its translucent head. "So be it. But know this. Once the door opens, it cannot be closed. What lies beyond may be salvation or annihilation. We do not know. We never could see past the threshold." Elias smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a species that had been beaten, broken, enslaved, and had risen anyway. "That's fine," he said. "We're used to not knowing. We're humans. We make a habit of walking into the dark and coming out the other side." The opening of the door took 7 days. Earth's consciousness focused all its power, every volcano, every earthquake, every storm, into a single harmonic frequency that resonated with the maw. The precursors contributed their ancient knowledge, guiding the process with a patience born of eternity. And humans, millions of them, stood in a circle around the world, holding hands, singing songs that had no words but carried the memory of every joy and every sorrow their species had ever known. The planetary consciousness fed on that song, grew stronger, and finally turned the key. The maw expanded until it encompassed the entire orbit of Jupiter. Beyond it was not another galaxy or another dimension. It was a place that had no name because no living being had ever seen it and returned. The precursors called it the source. Earth called it the womb. Humans, ever practical, called it the big beyond. Ships began to pass through. First, the human vessels that had returned from the Xylosian colonies. Then ships from other alien species who had decided to trust humanity. Then finally, the precursor ship itself. The Remembrancer hesitated at the threshold, looking back at Elias Thorne, who stood on the transformed earth with his feet bare on the glowing soil. "You are not coming?" the Remembrancer asked. Elias shook his head. "Someone has to stay and make sure the galaxy doesn't fall apart. Besides, Earth isn't ready to leave yet. We just woke up. We need time to grow, to learn, to become what we're supposed to be. The door will still be there when we're ready. But you may never see what lies beyond," the Remembrancer said. "Your human lifespan is so short. Even with Earth's power flowing through you, you cannot live forever." Elias laughed. It was a warm, rough sound, full of the kind of joy that comes from surviving something terrible. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We don't need to live forever. We just need to make sure that the ones who come after us have a better world than we did. That's what Earth taught us. That's what the enslavement taught us. The point isn't to reach the end. The point is to make the journey worth taking." The Remembrancer did not understand, but it bowed anyway, and then it led its ship through the maw. The other alien vessels followed, and then the human ships, carrying the bravest and the most curious of Earth's children. They disappeared into the light, and the maw began to shrink, not closing but stabilizing, becoming a permanent gateway in the heart of the solar system. On Earth, things changed again. The planetary consciousness, no longer focused on wrath or defense, turned its attention to healing. The glowing oceans became nurseries for new life. The shifting continents settled into patterns that favored biodiversity. The orange crystals that had erupted from the ground became a source of clean, limitless energy. And humans, the immune system of a waking world, began to spread, not as conquerors or slaves, but as gardeners. They traveled to other worlds, helping enslaved species rebuild their civilizations. They taught the galaxy what Earth had taught them, that strength is not the power to destroy, but the power to protect. Vex, the former supreme commander of the Xylosian Empire, lived out his days on a small island in what was once the Pacific Ocean. Earth had restored his mind, but not his memories. He remembered nothing of conquest or cruelty. He only knew that he was a being who had been given a second chance, and that the humans who tended the island's gardens treated him with a kindness he could not explain. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he would look up at the stars and feel a strange echo of fear. But then a human child would bring him a flower, and the fear would pass. Elias Thorne grew old, as humans do. He became a storyteller, sitting by fires on the shores of the glowing sea, telling the tale of the enslavement and the awakening. He always ended the same way. "They thought they could break us," he would say, his voice hoarse with age but still carrying that underground rumble. "They thought Earth was just dirt and water, and humans were just soft animals. But dirt can become mountains. Water can become floods. And soft animals? We become legends." He died on a spring morning, with his hand pressed to the soil. Earth's consciousness wept for him, and where his tears fell, new crystals grew. The humans who found his body did not bury it. They carried it to the edge of the maw and let the light take it, because they all knew, that Elias Thorne had not truly died. He had simply gone ahead, through the door, to see what was waiting on the other side. And when the rest of humanity was ready to follow, he would be there, smiling that rough, joyful smile, ready to walk into the dark together. The galaxy never